Hey everyone, and welcome back. In this video, we're talking about physicalism. So if you remember in the last video, we talked about uh, the mind-body problem, what it is, what physicalism is, and what dualism is. So Descartes is a dualist. And so he presents an argument for dualism that we'll talk about in the dualism video. Uh, and then that argument gets an objection from Princess Elizabeth, who is an actual princess who read Descartes' meditations when they came out and sent letters to Descartes, very politely tearing apart everything he said with arguments phrased as questions. Very polite, very kind, very, it was the 1600s, so everyone's letters were very formal and very sort of proper and polite and all that sort of jazz. But Princess Elizabeth presents objections to Descartes' view that are still sort of talked about and seen as pretty serious obstacles today, which is really cool. So here's a quote that came out of the Princess Elizabeth reading that was assigned for this week. Given that the soul of a human being is only a thinking substance, how can it affect the bodily spirits in order to bring about voluntary actions? So, in other words, how does a non-physical mind that is purely thinking cause a physical body to move? Because we have voluntary actions. We move on purpose sometimes. I mean, we have the occasional like muscle spasm or unconscious reaction to something. Some people toss and turn in their sleep. None of maybe that's all purely physical, uncaused by minds. But if you decide to walk into another room and then you go do that, clearly your decision, your thought caused you to walk, caused your body to move. So that's a physical event caused by a mental event. So how does that work? How does a non-physical mind cause a physical body to move? Because your body is a physical thing with mass and weight, but minds, thoughts, and desires are not physical according to dualism. They do not have mass or weight. They do not exert gravity or electromagnetic forces or a strong nuclear or weak nuclear force or any of that type of stuff. They do not exert physical forces on things. But physical objects, without having physical forces exerted on them, do not move or accelerate. That's basic physics. We know that. Without an external force exerted on something, it will not accelerate. Meaning, if it's stationary, it'll stay stationary. So if your body moves, if you're stationary and then you make a decision and you get up and move, something exerted physical forces there. But it couldn't have been your mind that exerted physical forces. Your mind's not physical. So how does a non-physical mind cause a physical body to move? That's the question. And this is the key problem that dualists face. Mental states, like thoughts and desires, seem clearly to cause bodily movements. If you do something and someone asks why, you can explain your thinking beforehand, and that is an answer to the question. Your thinking, your decisions caused your body to move, caused you to physically do things. But if mental states are not physical, then how does that work? How could that possibly work? It's not clear how a non-physical mental state could possibly cause physical objects like human bodies to move. They don't exert physical forces. How does it work? It's not clear what the answer is. And this has led to what's called the causal argument for physicalism. And this is a basic issue that is still a problem for dualists today. Now, this is still an argument going on. And it's led to an argument called the causal argument for physicalism. Sometimes called the closure argument for physicalism, because there's some stuff about physics is causally closed and sort of more complicated details. But we're going to go through a sort of simple, hopefully straightforward version of the argument so we can kind of see where we're coming from here. So here's the argument, just laying it out in premise conclusion form. All right. Premise 1, mental states cause physical effects. Right? Your decisions cause your body to move. Your thoughts cause you to do things, cause physical events. That seems pretty clear. We should all accept that. Premise 2, every physical effect has a physical cause. Right? And this seems empirically very well supported by work in physics, biology, neuroscience. When your body moves, there are physical causes of that. The muscle movements that are caused by electrical signals, that are caused by events in the brain, which are caused by other events in the brain, which some of which are caused by electrical signals sent from the body parts up to the brain, giving like input about what's going on in the world. That's what your sense of touch and things do. So signals get sent from your physical extensions to the brain. That causes other electrical signals to get sent, and they get sent down and the body moves, etc. Every physical event has some physical cause. Otherwise, it wouldn't occur. If there's a physical event, then physical forces caused it to happen. If electrons are moving, it's due to physical forces. If a physical object accelerates or moves, that's due to physical forces. So any physical event must have some physical cause. That's empirically just very well supported by all of our available evidence in neuroscience and psychology and physics, biology, etc. So those are our first two premises. And from premise 1 and 2, we can conclude that if the mental state is not physical, if the mental cause of some physical movement is not physical, then all physical effects of mental states have two causes. Right? Every physical effect that has a mental cause must also have a physical cause. But premise 4, physical effects of mental causes don't all have more than one cause. Not every physical movement of your body has both a full physical cause and a full mental cause. That's implausible, the argument says. So therefore, conclusion, mental states are physical. And so this argument, as written, is a valid argument. So the question is whether or not it's sound. Right? Because the conclusion follows from premise 3 and premise 4. Premise 3 says if the mental state is not physical, then all the physical effects of mental causes have two causes, a mental one and a physical one. But premise 4 says if the physical effects of mental causes don't all have more than one cause. So, therefore, it follows from 3 and 4 that mental states must be physical. Mental states that cause physical effects must be physical themselves. So premise 3 follows straight from premises 1 and 2. Because premise 1 says that mental states cause physical effects, and premise 2 says those physical effects have physical causes. So either the mental state is the physical cause, or there is a physical cause and also a mental cause, which means there are two causes. So if there aren't two causes, then the only option left is that the mental state must be the physical cause, which means that the mental state must be physical. So this is the causal argument for physicalism. So premise 1 says that mental states cause physical effects, and this seems right. You want to take a sip of water, so your arm moves the glass of water towards your face. That's a mental state causing a physical effect. Your thoughts control your body at least sometimes. Otherwise, the control we think we have over what we do is an illusion. Nothing we think has any effect on what our body does. That seems implausible at best. A little terrifying, to be honest. That means we're just passengers along for the ride as our physical body moves independent of anything we want or decide, and we don't realize it. That's a terrifying thing that seems also, in addition to being terrifying, also clearly false. So, premise one seems true. So we probably don't want to reject premise one. But remember, the argument is valid. So if the conclusion is false, if physicalism is false, and mental states aren't physical, then one of the premises must be false. Because if you have a valid argument and all the premises are true, then the conclusion must also be true. So if the conclusion is false, we need to show that the argument is not sound. And the only way to show that a valid argument isn't sound is to show that one of the premises is false. And premise one doesn't seem like it's false. It sure seems true. If anything's true, the fact that we make decisions and control our own body sometimes seems pretty true. So that's premise one. But premise two says that every physical event has a sufficient physical cause. Sufficient here just meaning like the cause alone is enough. So sometimes you might have multiple causes that work together, and none of those causes by themselves would be enough. Like imagine you and your friend work together to move a coffee table that neither one of you is strong enough to lift on your own. What caused the coffee table to move? Well, you caused it, and your friend caused it together. But neither one of you alone caused it to move. Neither one of you was the sole cause. Neither one of you would have been able to lift it by yourselves. So neither of you you're both causes, or in some sense, you're both partial causes. But neither one of you alone is a sufficient cause for the coffee table moving, because neither one of you moved it by yourself. Premise two says that every physical event has a sufficient physical cause, where the physical cause by itself is enough to cause the event. And that also seems right. If a physical object moves, like say your arm moves to lift the glass, then there must have been a physical cause. Electrical impulses sent from your brain, which were caused by other physical causes, and then those other physical causes themselves had other physical causes, and so on. Work in biology and neuroscience has done a lot in explaining what the physical causes of physical effects are. So there's really strong evidence that every physical event does have a sufficient physical cause. So that seems right too. We probably don't want to reject premise two. But premise one and premise two together are enough to give us premise three. Premise three follows straight from premises one and two. Now, premise four might be the weak link. Premise four says that all physical effects, or not all physical effects, have more than one cause. Premise four says that it can't possibly be true that every time your arm moves, there are two causes, either of which would have been plenty on its own. Like that's the world is not that inefficient. The world does not arbitrarily have a bunch of excess causes for whole categories of event. Sometimes something has more than one cause. If you and your friend both throw baseballs at a window at the same time, and the two baseballs hit at the same time, and the window shatters, all right, either one of you throwing a baseball at a window would have been enough on its own to shatter the window. So your throwing the baseball is a sufficient cause to shatter the window. And your friend throwing a baseball is also a sufficient cause for shattering the window. So that window shattering genuinely does have two different physical causes, either of which would have been plenty on its own. So it has two sufficient physical causes. The technical term for this is overdetermined. So that in some cases, sure, an event can have more than one sufficient cause. An event can have multiple causes, either of which would have been plenty on their own. But that doesn't happen all the time. And for to reject premise 4, that means that we're saying that when you move your arm on purpose, or when your body moves on purpose, every single time there are two causes, either of which would have been plenty on their own. Either of which would have been sufficient on their own. The mental cause and the physical cause. And that seems implausible. For one thing, that means it makes no sense to talk about the reason your arm moved or the cause of your foot tapping, because there is no singular reason. Every single time your arm moves, there's a mental cause, which is enough to explain the arm moving on its own, and also a physical cause, which is enough to explain the arm moving on its own. If there's both a mental and a physical cause, that means the physical cause is already there and already completely explains the physical event. It already completely explains your arm moving or your foot tapping or you standing up and walking to another room. But if the physical cause is something we can see and measure, and we know it's there because we can verify it, we can see and measure it, why even say there is a mental cause? We can't see or measure the mental cause of your arm moving. And we have no idea how it works. We still don't have a good answer to how a non-physical thought causes your physical arm to move. We have no idea how it works. We can't see it. We can't touch it. We don't understand how it could possibly work. And we have no evidence that it causes any physical effects, because those effects would have happened anyway due to the physical causes. So in the way we find out about causes is we hold different things fixed and we see what effects happen, what occurs. If you want to know whether or not a medicine causes people to get better, you do a trial. You take a bunch of people who have whatever illness, you give some of them the medicine, you don't give others the medicine, and you keep track of who got what, and you find out, do the people with the medicine stop having the illness while people who don't get the medicine continue to have the illness? Does taking the medicine cause you to get better? That's what a double-blind drug trial is. It's just trying to test whether or not this medicine will cause people to get better. It's testing whether or not the effect will be there. And that is how we get evidence that a medicine will cause you to get better. But if every physical effect of a mental event already has a physical cause that by itself is enough to explain the event, then we have no real reason to think that the mental cause is doing anything at all. The effect would be there even if the mental cause weren't there. We can't see or measure the mental cause working. We have no idea how the mental cause would work. We have no idea how a non-physical mental event, like a thought, would cause a physical body to move. So then why even say that it's there? Why even say that the mental cause is having any effect? We have no reason to think that it's having any effect, because we can't get rid of the physical cause and then see if the effect is still there, because there's always a physical cause. If the physical effect happened, then there was a physical cause. That's what premise 2 says. So the mental cause, it looks like, isn't actually doing any causal work. it only ever causes things that were already going to happen anyway. So it seems like it's really, if we reject premise 4 and say that there's always a mental cause and a separate physical cause, it looks like the mental cause isn't really causing anything. It's not actually a cause. So then it looks like rejecting premise 4 might basically mean rejecting premise 1 and saying that our thoughts have no effect on the world. Our thoughts have no effect on what our body does. There are no mental causes. Mental events have no causal impact on bodily movements. It looks like that might be what rejecting premise 4 will force us to say. Because it looks like if we reject premise 4, then the mental cause really isn't a cause. It has no effects that weren't already going to be caused anyway. And we have no idea how it works and no evidence that it's happening. So why even say it's happening then? So if you think physicalism is wrong, then you have to reject one of these premises. But all those options are bad. You either have to say minds don't actually have any effect on our bodies or how we move, which means that we are passengers in a meat machine running around, and nothing we think or decide has any impact on what our body does. Any control we think we have over our bodies is just an illusion, which is both terrifying and pretty clearly false, probably. Or we have to reject premise 2 and say some physical movements have no physical cause at all. They're only caused by mental causes, I mean. No physical cause, just mental causes. But that means we have to explain how a non-physical mind can cause a physical movement. And Descartes' answer was not satisfactory, and there hasn't really been a satisfactory answer since Descartes. So that's difficult, to say the least. And it also just seems empirically incorrect that the advent of biology, neuroscience, and all the other sciences, it's pretty well established that physical movements of the body do have physical causes. So rejecting premise 2 doesn't seem like a good option. And our third option is rejecting premise 4 and saying that every bodily movement has both a mental cause and a physical cause, either of which would alone have caused the movement. But that means that we have no evidence for mental causation. We have no real reason to think that our thoughts are actually causing anything. And so why believe it? So we don't have any good reason to think that our minds are causing our body then. So then that means we might end up having to reject premise 1 ultimately. And that, again, doesn't seem like a good option. So all three of these options seem bad. All three premises that we can reject seem like bad options to reject. But there is a fourth option, which is just to accept the conclusion. Say this is a sound argument, accept the conclusion, and conclude that minds just are physical things. Maybe minds are brains, or they're patterns of brain activity, or something like that. But whatever we want to say minds are, they have to just be physical things. They have to be brain activity or brains or whatever. Your thought has to just be synapses firing. That's all there is to thinking. So the mental causes then are the physical causes. The physical cause of your arm moving is a bunch of synapses firing in your brain. And the synapses firing in your brain is your thought. That's all there is to your thinking. There just is the brain activity. If that seems like the best option, if that's what you want to do in response to this argument, that means you're a physicalist. And many people have been convinced by this argument that physicalism must be true. But there are still objections to physicalism, which we will talk about in the dualism lecture video. So that's it for physicalism and the causal argument. If you have any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, I will see you in the next video.